Good morning everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Grace. I make lifestyle and motherhood content here on YouTube, and today's video I am going to be telling you my full birth story with all the details. At this point I should have the birth vlog up, which has the highlights of the experience, but we don't really talk through everything. So in this video I'm going to give you play-by-play. She was born February 18th, 2021 at 12:36 p.m., weighing 7 pounds, 15 ounces, and 19 inches long. I'm filming this in the middle of the video, but I just wanted to show you guys since she's awake. This is Miss Ivy Grace. Her outfit's too big. It's a little bit stained because she spit up on it, but that's okay. Here she is. My sweet girl. She is the best baby. We love her so much. I'm filming this about 2 weeks after giving birth. I was very fortunate and I had a really positive birth experience. I was able to have a natural, unmedicated labor and delivery. It was just the most intense, amazing, empowering experience of my whole life. And I can't wait to share all the details with you guys. I do have some notes on my phone just because I didn't want to forget any of the details. So, our story begins on February 17th. That day I had a midwife appointment where I got my second membrane sweep. I also had a chiropractic appointment that day to align my pelvis and get everything ready to go for birth. At that point I was 39 weeks in a day, and then when I had her we were 39 weeks in 2 days, so I was definitely ready to give birth at that point. So at about 9 o'clock that night I started having some mild cramping. And I wasn't sure if it was contractions or not. Not a big deal, kind of felt just like a period cramp. Went to bed, and then I woke up around 3, and I was having slightly more intense cramping. I was noticing that they were coming in a pattern, in a rhythm, every few minutes. I wasn't timing or anything at that point. I just laid in bed for a while, tried to fall back asleep, but I couldn't, so I got up and went into the kitchen and had some cereal because I was hungry. And then at that point now that I was sitting up, more awake, I was noticing the contractions more regularly. So I quickly just downloaded the contraction timer app on my phone and started kind of timing just to see where we were at. I knew it wasn't active labor at that point just because it was not that painful, it wasn't that intense, it just kind of felt like a bad period cramp. I had it in the front, down low, and then a little bit in the back too. From timing it, they were coming every 5 to 6 minutes and lasting about 30 seconds to a minute and a half, so some definite variation in there. I was kind of getting excited, is this it? I don't know. I wanted to just kind of let my body do its thing and stay calm. Then I decided to just get back into bed and kind of let things go, but I wanted to kind of let Davis know what was going on. So I asked him if we could cuddle. I climbed into bed with him, and okay, the second I started to reach over to lean on him, I felt this huge gush down below of warm fluid, and I kind of just froze. And I looked at Davis and I think my water just broke. He's half asleep and he's like, what? Right now? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And it's leaking out of me in the movies. So I'm trying to get up out of bed and get to the bathroom so I'm not leaking amniotic fluid all over our bed. We both got up. We were both kind of excited and just shocked that this was happening. I called my midwife's office. I gave some information to the operator, and then she told me my midwife would call me back in half an hour or so. So we just kind of hung out and waited for the midwife to call, and I kept changing out my pad, trying to catch all the amniotic fluid because it was leaking so bad. At one point I just said screw it, and I got an old towel and no pants and was just holding that up there to catch it because there was There was a lot. So then the midwife called us back and I kind of told her what was going on, you know, contractions, my water broke. And she was saying like, yeah, it sounds like you are going into labor. And she kind of encouraged me to labor at home for a bit, as long as I felt comfortable or until the contractions started to get more intense and more strong. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. It's like an hour later, so sorry if the lighting changed or something. But feeding is quite the process. I just put Ivy down for a nap, so now I can talk to you without any distractions, although she is the best and cutest distraction ever. Okay, so we were laboring at home and I decided that I wanted to take a shower. It definitely had some contractions in there. They were starting to get a bit more intense, but still not, you know, still not bad. Then after that, I decided to get ready. I wanted to put on some makeup. I just wanted to look and feel a little bit more put together. Davis is kind of flying around the house, just packing up all the last minute things. And by the time I was getting done putting on my makeup, I was like, whew, feeling it a little bit more. I was glad that I had showered and put on makeup early, else I probably would not have done it later. So we came out into the living room and I was trying a couple different labor techniques, and at that point what I felt best was really just sitting and bouncing, kind of doing hip circles on the birth ball, like leaning over it, just trying to keep everything open. I will also put on a positive birth affirmation from Bridget Taylor. It's on her YouTube channel, and I was kind of just trying to get in the zone and get really centered. And about halfway through that, the contractions were getting to a point where I felt like maybe we should go to the hospital. They still weren't super intense or anything, but they were definitely getting more and more so, and to the point where I kind of had to like slow down and kind of like concentrate on them a little bit more to work through them. We called the midwife again. At that point we had been laboring at home for about 2 or 3 hours, kind of let her know what was going on, and just we were at the point where we felt like we would be more comfortable at the birth center. I forgot to mention that we didn't actually give birth at a hospital. It was a family birth center. She told us who was on call. Have been working with the midwives, right? There's 6 of them. I've met every single one of them except for one, who ironically was the midwife who was on call, which I was like, of course, it's the one I haven't met. But all was well. She ended up being absolutely amazing and it all worked out. So we got our things together and we got ready to head out. Let me tell you, laboring in the car was not comfortable. I still had those positive affirmations playing in the car, so I was really just zoning in on that, and that was helping a bit, but they were definitely getting closer and closer together. We were about 4 minutes apart at this point. And then we arrived at the birth center. It was about like 6:36 in the morning at this point. We said a prayer in the car that everything would go smoothly, and we headed on in. They did like the COVID screening on me, stuck me in a wheelchair because I guess that's a policy, and wheeled me on down to the birth center where we got checked in. My contractions were coming quite regularly. At this point, like standing and kind of swaying through them was really helping me. Once we got checked in, they took us to a triage room where I had to get hooked up to the fetal monitors for a little bit to kind of check your vitals, check the baby, see where we're at. This was probably one of the most like frustrating parts of the whole experience, was having to be laying down in bed while they had the monitors on and while they got the readings they needed. I really wanted to be like up and moving around, and yeah, laying in bed and having contractions was super uncomfortable for me. It kind of took a while. I think they had to get 3 kind of spikes in the baby's heart rate to just show that they're okay, and she was just kind of sleepy in there and not really moving around very much. And it probably took at least like 30 minutes, maybe longer. I don't know, time like meant nothing to me at that point to get the readings we needed. And I was stuck in bed for most of that. And then also they did a cervical check on me. Earlier in the day when I had gone to my appointment, I was still 2 centimeters dilated and 50% effaced. But when they checked me when I got to the birth center, I was 4 centimeters dilated and 70% effaced, and the baby was super, super low. Like they had a hard time kind of feeling the cervix because her head was so low in there. So that was encouraging that I was more dilated, things were headed in the right direction. And then while I was still laying in bed waiting for the baby to do its thing, the midwife came in. I met her for the first time and she was really great, and she that day was working with a midwife student. She was awesome. Being a student wasn't quite as in demand as the actual midwife, so she was able to stay with us through a lot of the process, which was so amazing. And then once the midwife got there, Davis was like advocating for me. He's like, she really wants to get up and move around. And the midwife was like, oh yeah, you could do that. Okay. So I still had the monitors on, but they let me stand up and stay plugged into the thing and kind of just sway and move a little bit. And a little bit of movement helped to get the baby going. They got the measurements they needed. All was well, thank goodness. After we were in the triage room, they determined where I was at. The readings looked good. We headed into our labor and delivery room. It was really nice, big, had lots of space. I think I ate a banana on the way there, random. They let you eat at the birth center, which is awesome. Super grateful for that. And at that point, I think it was about 7:30. And once we got in there, I headed straight for the tub. They had a big jacuzzi tub that you can labor in, and I was really excited to do that. So I changed into my little outfit and got into the tub, and it felt nice for a while. It was really nice and warm. It had the bubbles, and what I would do was as I was having a contraction, I would turn on the jacuzzi bubbles, so it was just kind of like this loud distraction, and it felt nice. I labored in the tub for an hour or two, I would say. Davis was in there with me. He kind of got everything situated in our room. I was pretty much in labor land at that point. I was not like paying attention to any of that, and he was in there with me and just like giving me positive affirmations, and he was massaging my shoulders and my back and just helping me focus. But things were starting to get pretty intense at this point, the most painful that contractions had been. And I don't want to scare anyone, like it's painful, but like you can do it, you can conquer it. Things were getting pretty painful in there, and I was starting to doubt myself. It had been a couple of hours since I got checked and I was at a 4, right? So I was just thinking like, I'm okay now, but I don't know how long I can do this for. If I was going to be in labor for 12 more hours or, you know, longer than that, like a lot of first-time moms are, I just started thinking, I don't know how long I can do this for. And I started kind of questioning myself, and Davis could tell, the nurse could tell, and you know, that was okay that I was doing that. I think that's a normal part of being in labor. Davis was encouraging me a lot. The nurse gave me a pep talk that I really needed. She kind of like got down on my level and was like, okay, I know things are getting intense right now, and I know it's your birth plan to go unmedicated, and I support you in that. If you want to do that, you need to kind of recenter yourself and focus and get yourself above the pain and kind of find something else to focus on. That was really good advice, although it is hard to do in the moment. Seriously, I'm so grateful for my birth team that knew my preferences and my plan and supported me in it. And even when I was starting to question myself, they validated the concerns and listened to them and were open to them, but they also knew my original desire and were trying to help me achieve that. So that was so incredible. Like, oh, thank goodness for them. But anyway, I was talking to Davis, wondering if I should maybe like get some interventions, because wow, this was a lot. He suggested that we get out of the tub, we try some of the other labor techniques that we had practiced, you know, maybe getting on the ball, maybe walking around, doing some counter pressure, stuff like that. So I was like, okay, we can try that. So we got out of the tub. I think I got on the birth ball at that point and started kind of bouncing, and contractions were getting stronger and stronger, closer and closer together. At that point I was pretty hungry, so I ate a Lara bar, like a lemon flavored one. It was very good, although I remember at one point I would like started to have a contraction, it was in my mouth, and I was like, I need to spit this out. And the midwife like grabs the barf bag and lets me, well, spit it out. I didn't throw up though. Didn't throw up my entire pregnancy, including labor. Pretty cool. I also remember Davis hadn't had breakfast, so he ordered something from the birth center. He got like a breakfast sandwich, and the smell of it was so repulsive to me. At one point, he was just like talking to me through a contraction, and the smell of his breath, I literally turned and gagged. Like, I thought I was gonna throw up, but I didn't. And he quickly ate it and had a breath mint. So all was well. And I found at this point that counter pressure was super, super helpful. Davis would kind of get behind me and push really hard, kind of on my low back, like on my hips area. And it really relieved a lot of the tension and helped me so much. And the midwives also helped with that a little bit, but honestly, like Davis's was better. He just like did it really hard and strong, which I needed. Whereas the midwives and the nurse were like a little more gentle, even though I was kept saying like harder, harder. I was very grateful for Davis. Also at some point during this, I don't remember exactly when, but it was when I had gotten out of the tub, I got a COVID test. So I was trying to wear my mask up until that point, and it was one of the rapid ones. It came back about an hour later and it was negative, so that was awesome, and I didn't have to wear my mask anymore. Yes. Wearing a mask in labor was a little bit tough. Okay, and then things were still getting more intense. I was like, oh, I do not know how long I can do this, because I didn't know how far along I was at that point. I talked to the midwives about options. She was saying, you know, maybe we can try some gas. And ultimately we decided that we were going to check me and kind of see where I was at progression-wise, and then kind of make a decision from there. A couple hours had passed. I don't know exactly what time it was. Probably like 9? That's my guess. So got on the bed, which was a challenge. The midwife was checking me, and I swear it took so long. I was having contractions like through it, and I was just waiting. And even when she like had her fingers in there checking, it was like, I think it's about and she wasn't doing it on purpose. It's because the baby's head was so low that it was hard to feel my cervix. But this is where the whole thing kind of shifted. She told me that I was 7 centimeters dilated and 70% effaced. And when she said that, I was like, okay, I'm 7 centimeters already. It's only been a couple hours. I'm almost transition, which is supposed to be the shortest part. I can do this. It totally gave me my second wind, and I'm so grateful that I was 7 at that point. After that, I like refocused and was completely like in the zone. I can do this, like, let's go. And it also told me that that's why contractions were hurting so bad, is because I had gone from a 4 to a 7 in like a couple hours. So after that, I was just about in transition, and then I was in transition. I labored in some different positions. The nurses and midwives kind of helped me find good ones. I think I labored mostly on the bed, but not lying down. I was like on my knees, leaning over the bed, leaning over the ball, trying like some squatting. Changing positions was huge for me. And some of the other techniques that I used to kind of get through each contraction was laboring in different positions, using a focal point. Now, I didn't think that this was going to be helpful to me. I thought I was going to be like eyes closed, like very focused within, but finding something like outside of myself to focus on was super helpful. So for each contraction, I would find like a point on the wall or on the clock or someone's eyes even, and just like focus so hard on that and not move my eyes from that spot. I thought I was going to be like counting my breaths, but in the moment it just didn't really feel right. So I was kind of doing rhythmic breathing, where I would get into like a breath pattern and kind of make noises to go along with it sometimes. And I was trying to have deep breaths, not too shallow, you know, stay calm, stay relaxed. Once I got into transition, I found making sounds like groaning or moaning, just kind of low sounds, were really helpful. So I was doing that through contractions. Counter pressure was huge. Davis's counter pressure especially. The poor guy was working so hard. Like, I was working hard, but he was too in his own way. Like, his hands, like his arms were shaking by the end, and he kind of hurt his back just because he was doing such intense counter pressure. And then was also like taking his fist and kind of digging it into a certain spot, like on my sacrum, which was really helpful. I was also kind of saying different mantras or like positive affirmations in my head. The two that I kept coming back to, especially during transition, were I'm stronger than this, and my body won't give me anything I can't handle. And I kept just repeating those in my head, and it really helped me kind of focus on other things. And, you know, from other people too, positive affirmations were helpful. It was intense at this point, you guys, but I wasn't scared. You know, I knew that the pain had a purpose and that each contraction I progressed more and more, and I was opening up and bringing my baby down, and just focusing on that, remembering that nothing is wrong, that my body is doing exactly what it's supposed to, really helped me kind of embrace the pain. Something else that was important for me is that you get breaks between contractions. Early on, the breaks were great. I felt totally like myself, totally normal, almost. And then kind of as things progressed more and more, the breaks weren't quite as much of a break. They had me hooked up to the monitors again at some point. You could see the contractions would be at their peak. You know, when early on, between them, they would go back down. But during transition, they would peak and they'd come a little back down, but they would stay kind of like mid-level. So between the peaks, it still kind of felt like maybe an earlier one, just that pressure. It's hard to describe the sensation. It's the same like area as, you know, period cramps, like down low in your abdomen, and then kind of in the low back a little bit too for me. It's different for different people. It's kind of just like a burning, pulling pressure situation. And as we moved along in transition, I also got a lot of rectal pressure, which is the baby pushing down, like getting super low. And they say when you get that, it means you're really close. So I was kind of excited when I had that. The one thing about my labor and delivery that was a little bit, I guess you could say scary, potentially, it wasn't really in the moment, but I did have a couple of blood pressure spikes. As a consequence of that, I did have to do the constant fetal monitoring at the end. So you can see in the birth vlog, I'm wearing those monitors around my belly, and that's just so they could keep a close eye on me and the baby and make sure everybody is okay, which we completely were. It didn't affect us at all. And then afterwards, they did have me do like a urine test to check for preeclampsia, and it was not preeclampsia, but having the high blood pressure did earn me the title of gestational hypertension, which I'll carry into my next pregnancy apparently, even though it was just at the very end of the pregnancy, whatever. So that was the one thing that didn't like quite go to plan. It was definitely a little unexpected. That's why, you know, I'm really glad that I went in having a flexible birth plan. Yes, I knew what I wanted. Yes, I prepared for it, but I knew there's a lot of things that can kind of be out of your control during birth. That was one of them, and I was very grateful that it didn't come to anything more serious. I labored through transition and whatnot, and was using those techniques for maybe an hour or two more. It wasn't that long. Like, transition goes pretty darn fast, which is good because it is the most intense part. And I could tell we were getting close. Davis and I were in the room alone at one point, and I started to feel a lot of that rectal pressure, and I started to feel like I needed to push. So we used the call button and like called everybody in. No, I was like not really too coherent at this point, so Davis was advocating like she feels like she needs to push, she wants to get checked again. They came in and checked me again. This time I was 9 centimeters and almost completely effaced. Not quite. I don't think they gave me a percentage, or at least I don't remember it. The nurse she was the one checking me, and she was actually able to stretch my cervix a little bit just to get it more out of the way. She had me do kind of like a practice push, and while I was doing that, she moved the cervix out of the way just to help things along a little bit because I was so close at that point. When I did that, she told me like, oh wow, you're a really strong pusher, like you're not gonna push for long. And that was encouraging. That made me feel good. I was laboring more and more. They called the midwife and the midwife student in because things were happening. I kind of expected there to be a moment where they're like, okay, you're 10 centimeters, like go, start pushing. with the midwives and with being unmedicated, your body really like reacts on its own. And they told me, we're going to be able to tell when you're ready because your body is going to start pushing on its own. I was like, what? Like, how is it going to do that, right? It did that. I remember the first one, I was contracting, it was really intense, and I just had this like, oh, and started pushing just once, and then I was like, oh my gosh, like, and the midwives were like, that's amazing, that's exactly what's supposed to be happening. Okay, so then after my body started pushing on its own, they checked me one last time just to make sure that everything was good, that I was fully dilated, everything was out of the way, and I was. Out of 10 at that point. I was fully dilated. I think the cervix was just a little bit over. The midwife was able to just push it out of the way with one of the contractions, and I was there. And there wasn't that moment like, okay, you can start pushing now. It was kind of just like, if you feel the urge, you know, with each contraction, which is what I wanted. I wanted kind of self-directed pushing with the urge rather than like coaching through it, but I wanted some support too. I remember like vividly looking at the clock and it was like 11:40 something. It was almost noon. That's when I started pushing. And let me tell you guys, pushing, honestly, it felt good. Like, comparatively good, because the contractions, you're trying to relax and let them do their thing, which is really hard because your instinct is just to like, oh, tense up, you know? When you're pushing with contractions, it felt like I was doing something about the pain and like, you know? It was hard, but it felt good. So I started pushing with the contractions. They again were really encouraging, saying I was such a strong pusher. After just a couple, they were saying like, we can see her head, like we can see her hair when I would push, but the baby was kind of doing the thing where like she would come out a little bit and then like rock back as she was trying to get past the pubic bone. We were there for a bit, kind of with that rocking back and forth. They were kind of coaching me a little bit on the best way to push, and we tried a couple different positions. At first I was kind of seated, like leaning back slightly but seated. I really didn't want to push lying on my back. I wanted to do alternative positions. So started with that, with kind of my legs up, and that worked pretty well. They wanted me to like grab underneath my legs, which I don't know, I felt like I couldn't do it first, but then eventually I did later on, and it was super helpful. One funny moment, I remember a nurse came in partway through and asked how long I had been pushing for, and I'm like on the bed at this point, and I respond, oh, I started just before noon. And they all kind of looked at me and they're like, how do you know that? Because I think they all expected me to be like rather out of it, but I knew how long I had been pushing for. And then we all kind of decided like, let's try a different position. So we moved to side lying, and I got on my left side at first. They were helping hold my legs. You can see this all in the birth vlog. And I finally grabbed like underneath my legs and was kind of like pulling them back as I was pushing. Something that they encouraged me to do is right at the end, when you feel like you are done, just push past that a little bit and push a little bit longer, which I did, and it was so helpful. And again, you have breaks between contractions when you're pushing, which is huge. So it's not like you're just pushing like the entire time, and we kind of could like regroup between those. Davis was right there with me, holding my hand a lot of the time, helping hold my leg. That was awesome. About halfway through that, they asked if I wanted to feel her head, which was like, what? Her head is already here? That's crazy. And I did the first time. It was like weirdly one of the most vivid memories I have of this whole thing. I reached down and I think I accidentally touched a towel instead of her head. And I was like, that's her head? Are you sure? They thought I actually touched her head and not the towel, and they were like, yeah, that's it. And I was like, kind of concerned because it felt so weird. It felt like this moist like head of broccoli, but I'm pretty sure it was just the towel. And I asked the midwife about it after, and she's like, yeah, I think you must have touched the towel on accident. Then another time they asked if I wanted to feel her head like as it was coming out, and I did, and it was like, okay, now that's a baby head. And that gave me a lot of motivation, a lot of energy once I could feel her head. They also offered me a mirror. I wasn't sure if I would want to see or not as I was pushing. Tried it. Nah, not a fan. It was just like too much to focus on for me, and I just kind of wanted to pay attention to how my body felt. So off with the mirror. I only pushed for about 45 minutes, so not that long, but I got to the point where I was like, okay, Grace, there is only one way out of this. There is only one way to make this stop. I remember just gearing up like, I'm just gonna freaking do it. And I did. Shortly after I had that little realization, I started pushing just with all my strength and everything I had. And it was just this crazy, like, primal experience where nature took over, and I felt so strong and so powerful, but also so like helpless in a way, because your body just takes over. And I don't know, it was pretty incredible. So shortly after doing a few pushes like that, I was crowning, the baby was crowning, and I think that's when I felt her head. The ring of fire, that happened. That's when the head is stretching you out down there, and it did not feel good, but it didn't last long, luckily. That was probably the hardest moment, but it was also the shortest, so it wasn't the hardest. But when I was crowning and I felt that ring of fire, but you have to push past it and push into it, that was a little difficult. Oh, and I also switched to my other side at some point to help things out. So I was side lying on my right side when I delivered. After a couple really strong, intense contractions and pushes, the head came out, and from that moment on, it was just like a blur. I think I was still having a contraction. I pushed a little bit more, her body slipped out too, and she was born. They put her on my belly because her cord was still attached, and I just remember I just felt so overwhelmed and overcome and shocked, like with this sense of accomplishment. One, that I had just birthed a baby. One, like, that's amazing no matter what, but also completely unmedicated. And I was like, oh, I did that. Oh my, I did that. But then also just that my baby is here and she's lying on me. And it was just the most surreal moment of my life, where you go from being pregnant to being a mom. And makes me a little teary to think about. They put her on my belly, and she was all warm and slippery, and she was crying really loud. I had my hands on her, and I think I started crying. I think David started crying, and it was just the most incredible moment. And I'm so glad that we got it on camera, because it was a blur in my mind. Being pregnant, you know that there's a baby in there, obviously, but it's really hard to picture like a full-on, like, arms, legs, heads, like torso baby in there. And then when she comes out, it's like, oh my gosh, like her arms were like so wide when she came out, and gosh, it was just incredible. And she was so beautiful. She was healthy, she was perfect. She had this mess of dark hair and long, I mean, for a baby too, which I was not expecting. I remember holding her for the first time thinking, just, she is so tiny and precious and seemed so fragile. I think I asked the nurse, like, can you help me move her? I mean, I already loved her, but meeting her and seeing what she looked like, I had dreamed of that moment for so long. That was incredible. We took our time and kind of just like absorbed, like, okay, she's here, you know? So after a little bit, the cord stopped pulsing. We did delayed cord clamping, and Davis got to cut the cord. I think he was a little bit nervous that he was gonna do it wrong, but he did fine. And I was able to bring her up to my chest and just like have that moment that I've been dreaming of. And she fell asleep on my chest. They put a blanket over her, and we were doing skin to skin. They put a little hat on her. We were probably there for like, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. And then I had to birth the placenta, which honestly, I don't even remember super well. You still like contract a little bit. So with one of them, I just pushed a little bit and out came the placenta, which is so much easier than birthing a baby. It doesn't have any bones, that helps. Then as I was holding the baby, and you know, Davis and I were just marveling at her and looking at her, the midwives were attending to down there. I did have a small tear. It's like a minor 2nd degree tear. They numbed me down there and they were stitching me up as I was holding the baby. I also wanted to see the placenta and the cord just because I was kind of fascinated. After they had me all repaired and whatnot, they brought the placenta up and showed it to us. It was like really big, which was interesting. And they showed us where the cord attaches to it and where it veins off in all these different directions. And it was just incredible to think, like, I grew a baby and I grew an organ. Like, that was cool. They also showed us the cord, saw that there were the 2 vessels in it because baby had a 2-vessel cord, which did not faze her at all apparently. And after that, we kind of just continued on into attempting feeding, and they weighed her and measured her. Before all of that, Davis got to hold her for the first time and they did skin to skin, and it was just, like the most precious, heart-melting moment ever. She was just the most beautiful, perfect baby, and so strong. She could hold up her head right from the beginning. Like when she was laying on my chest, she could bring it back up, and she was just incredible. So the whole thing, from the time my water broke to the time I had baby in my arms, was about 9 hours, 3:30 to about 12:30, which is pretty darn quick for a first baby. It was definitely faster than I had expected, but I'm grateful that I had a quick and smooth delivery. We ended up staying 2 nights at the hospital, which is pretty standard. The whole experience, labor, giving birth, having the baby, meeting her for the first time, it was the most intense, challenging, beautiful, and just empowering experience of my entire life. It was amazing. I was so proud of myself for bringing that little baby into the world, and I kind of felt like, okay, if I can do that, I can do anything. And Davis was the most amazing, supportive birth partner throughout the whole experience. I could not have done it without him. And just the way he looked at me afterwards, like just in awe, that in itself made it all worth it. We also had the most incredible birth team. I'm so grateful for all of them, for our midwives, for our nurses. And they were so encouraging and just calm and supportive, like my cheerleaders the whole time. I'm so grateful to have had this experience. If you are someone who's having a baby soon, I hope and pray that your birth is positive and empowering, no matter how you give birth, whatever happens. I think that is about it for my birth story. This is probably like the longest video ever. Sorry, not sorry, but I just don't want to forget a single detail. My mind is already kind of glossing over some of the details, so I wanted to get this filmed as soon as I could. This is kind of the last video in, my pregnancy journey, talking about that very end, labor and giving birth. So thank you to everyone who has followed along with me and been so supportive and encouraging throughout my pregnancy. I'm super grateful for you guys. It's been so fun to document my journey on YouTube and share it, and I hope that you guys will stick around as I journey into parenthood and being a new mom, figuring all that out, having a newborn. It's crazy, but it's so amazing and so worth it. If you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel. I would love it if you guys would join our little YouTube family here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Make sure you follow me on Instagram for all the behind the scenes of the baby stuff. My username is @GraceLavon. That's where I post a lot more frequently. All the cute baby pictures and videos and things like that. So don't want to miss out on that. And I think that is about it. So thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!